when I first was concepting this, I just wanted to I've mentioned on the podcast before, so it's not like a surprise I'm telling anyone here, but the name came up after a very, I'd say, transformative psilocybin trip. And I was just feeling a lot of love towards the people in my life that I care about and that are doing incredible work. And I was like, how can I share those people? Like, I just kind of want to stand on the rooftops and tell everybody about these awesome people doing cool things. And yeah, that's when I came up with the name People Are the Answer. And just, if we can all work together and humanize difficult situations and just, understand we're all citizens of Earth just trying to get by, that we can be a lot more successful in making the world a better place.
Welcome back to part 2 of an extra special episode of People Are the Answer. I'm Kait Grey, producer and today's guest host, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized transformational social impact and to shine a light on all the good happening in a world often hyper-focused on the negative. In the second part of this episode, featuring our host and podcast creator, Jeffrey M. Zucker, we discuss his work in real estate startups, design, cannabis, and more of his advocacy work in drug policy and criminal justice reform. If you're starting here, head back an episode to part 1, where we discuss his growing up in the South, the incredible legacy his parents bestowed on him, his work in real estate startups, hospitality, and more advocacy work in the drug policy and criminal justice reform space. We also cover his goals for this podcast and his movie that's coming soon called The Late Game. Now back to it.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode that is reluctantly about me. I just wanted to add the note that this was recorded before the atrocities of October 7th in Israel. And honestly, my own and many others' entire worlds have changed since. And, it's different listening to myself even speak before that. But I just wanted to add that caveat into this episode. And thanks again for listening and for supporting People Are the Answer.
From Leafless, you went on to create America-Israel Cannabis Association. What went on there? What were you guys doing, and how'd that go?
Yeah. As you see, I'm prone to take on interesting projects that I'm passionate about, regardless of their potential financial merit, it seems. But ICA, the America-Israel Cannabis Association, started that with my friend Michael Scher, who's deeply involved in the cannabis industry and has been for many years. And the goal was to help North American and Israeli cannabis companies work together. Israel was and is really leading on the tech side of the industry and the research side. And so being able to bring that with, the retail that the U.S. is leading in was valuable. And, we attended the Canatech conference a few times in Tel Aviv, which was amazing. And, we had a couple of sort of side trips to that we would host, where we would go visit cannabis businesses and also see some sites. So, ICA never really knew what it was, like whether it was a membership organization or a travel organization, but we were trying to figure it out. We were trying to test things and figure it out. But when COVID happened, it just really fell off the table. We had hired an amazing person that's still in the cannabis industry, Sarah Gluck, I think she was COO, but was kind of running the day-to-day of it. And, she moved on to a new opportunity right before COVID. And so then, Michael and I were both incredibly busy. Josh Rubin was advising as well, who's the owner of Day 3 Labs, another awesome cannabis company. Sarah's is Cannabis, a great apparel company. And
shout out to Cannabis.
I love their stuff. And anyway, so ICA, it just really fell off. COVID happened and it had kind of become a travel organization at that point. Obviously that wasn't happening, and it just fell off the priority list over the time because there wasn't really a lot to do during COVID for it.
Yeah, and you couldn't really travel back then anyway.
Right. So it was just, I still believe in it. It still is a thing we talk about reviving at some point potentially. There's some people that have tried to do some similar things in the space. But I would love if there's anyone out there listening that wants to put a concerted effort toward ICA, I'm willing to listen and Michael's willing to listen.
Yeah, it sounds like a very necessary link.
Yeah, and certainly there are links and there's companies and there's conferences and there's, some orgs, but we had, we just kind of had a specific vision around it and how we wanted to endear people to Israel and the cannabis industry there as well. And so yeah, I mean, we're certainly open on future opportunities.
Awesome. So from ICA, you went on and started Two Bridges Design. You were the president. You started that with the incomparable Wells Collins. This was definitely one of my favorite ventures that we've worked on together. I feel like the team learned a lot from this one. I know I did. What did you learn from Two Bridges?
Yeah, I love Two Bridges. So, I like to think that I'm good at identifying good people that are good at things, I guess, and trying to help them amplify those things. And so, yeah, Wells and I went to high school together, good friends. And, we'd stayed in touch throughout college. He had done some contract graphic design work for me. And he's, as you know, he's a world-class designer. His skill's amazing. I love working with him. I love sitting with him while he's designing and him making immediate changes to everything, and just his artistic ability is just pretty unbelievable. And so yeah, there was a point at which in 2016, I think, where I was just, maybe even 2015, where I was just instead of investing in other people's companies, I want to invest in sort of my own business again. And I brought on my amazing chief operating officer, Joe Primavera, and then months later, maybe over a year later, brought on Wells to sort of be the in-house graphic designer. And part of, the pitch was let's start our own design firm in addition, while we're doing this. And so we did that. And it was Two Bridges after the two bridges that used to connect Charleston and Mount Pleasant. He lived on Sullivan's Island growing up. I lived in West Ashley. So opposite sides of those bridges, now a single bridge, but that was where the name came from. And it was fun. We did, I don't recall, maybe you have it over there, how many years we were doing this, but a few years, I think. And we designed everything from branding for restaurants, political campaigns, to icons for apps, to just all sorts of things. A lot of things that Wells had experience in that I hadn't had as much, but I've always loved graphic design. My Aunt Susie's a graphic designer, and always was interested in that. I mean, I talk of a lot of things that I wanted to do when I was a kid. Graphic designer was one of them too. And
you're still pretty good at it, though. I feel like just as a lay person, you can pick up a Adobe Illustrator and roll.
Yeah, I can do a little bit. I can definitely, I think, do more than the average person my age. Not kids these days are
they're robots.
But yeah, so I mean, I learned a lot, and it was fun being able to see my ideas come up on screen, because I'm not anywhere near the illustrator or drawer that he is. So, it was fun to build ideas together, and we were growing, doing pretty well. And just, we both are relatively new parents, going through a lot in life, and just Wells had some other opportunities that he wanted to look at, and I don't blame him. We're still good friends, stay in touch. And, we decided to, for me, it was when Wells decided he wanted to move on to something else, it was sure, you could continue Two Bridges and bring in another partner and whatever. But that for me, it was me and Wells. It wasn't really it wasn't of interest to me to work with anyone else in that capacity. And, but yeah, I learned a ton, and I really like design. I love branding, and, yeah, I mean, it was a fun business to work on.
Kind of iconic, the thought of two bridges becoming one.
Yep.
So let's move on to your current endeavors. Saltshaker Holdings, you're the founder, president, and CEO. You often refer to this business as your bread and butter. How has Saltshaker stood the test of time?
Yeah, so Saltshaker is, just my overall holdings company, kind of run most of my stuff under, and it, started when we bought that first property in college in 2009. And, it's called Saltshaker because a lot of people in my family are really into salt. My dad, my cousins, my dad's dad, and me and my sister, my brother. Anyway, we like salt, for better or worse. And, there's always fights for the Saltshaker at family gatherings. And also, salt is this beautiful preservative that's been around for many years. It used to be used as a currency. Salt has an incredible history. There's a great book about it that I've read parts of. So, sorry, author. But yeah, and went with that because it had those familial ties. Salt also adds flavor to things, and we like to think that we add flavor to industries, and that sort of concept came from real estate because real estate agents had this really bad reputation in general, we felt like. And like, so Alex with his company, Hodera Real Estate, and us with our businesses, we were trying to change that and change the face of real estate. And that was part of it. And so, I mean, I've built my real estate business under Saltshaker, my film production business, had Two Bridges among other things. And, I've made some angel investments in some companies that we advise, but it was kind of just like my mini version. I thought of it at least as my mini version of Intertech, of what my dad created in terms of housing all the stuff I was working on.
Where do you see Saltshaker going?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, honestly. I think just the way the market's been, there's a lot of things changing and the real estate market's changing. So I think I'm kind of taking a little bit of a wait and see approach as we get through this point in the market. But, I'm focusing a lot on my film business. So I hope that film will be a big part of the future. And, whether it's our existing multifamily portfolios on the real estate side, I expect to be in real estate in some capacity. And, hopefully build something out that can sustain, the employees and family long term.
So you mentioned earlier Green Lion Partners, which is your company with Mike Bologna. You've got a couple, you have an event coming up with BU, your alma mater. What is the event? First of all, tell us a little bit more about Green Lion Partners, but then I want to hear more about the event.
Yeah, so, I mentioned Mike and I starting it in 2015. It's evolved over the years. We have invested in and advised a variety of companies in the cannabis space, some of whom still exist. And, I mentioned this era in cannabis being a tough one, but, we right now our busiest companies, Dip Devices, our vaporizer company. I've got the little dipper right here, give a little shout out. But basically, the idea with Dip was to make concentrate consumption approachable. Mike and I were becoming avid concentrate consumers, and it's different than smoking. I mean, I like all sorts of consumption methods. That's why you'll hear me say consume. Like, people don't just smoke cannabis or weed or whatever. There's edibles and there's concentrates and there's topicals, etc., tinctures. But for us, we were really getting into concentrate, and we didn't really want to be in hardware initially because there were so many hardware devices out there already. But a friend showed us this device that was called the Dipstick at the time that, you could just hold down a button. Let me turn her on.
5 clicks on and off, Jeff.
Well, yeah, I know how to use it. Okay, mine's not usually off. So you hold down the button and you just lightly touch this exposed coil on the concentrate. That's our signature vapor tip technology. And basically it brings dabbing into the palm of your hand. So at the time, we loved concentrates, but they were hard to use. They were very intimidating. Like, the way most people were consuming was with a big glass rig and a blowtorch, which like scares people.
Yeah.
And so the idea of making it more approachable was always interesting to me. And then I took a dab out of the palm of my hand with what was the Dipstick at the time, and that led to us saying like, oh, we can really open up the concentrate markets with this. And so myself, Mike Bologna, Jeff Dayton, and some other investor partners, we purchased the IP for the business and brought on the founder of the Dipstick, Matt Watson, as our partner. And that was in 2016, I think, late 2016. And I think we launched the Dipper in January of 2017. Yep. And we revamped the product, we revamped the brand. And, I think at the time we'd hoped it was going to be like, I don't know, like a 2-3 year project. And now we are, 7 years in, and 7 or 8 years in. And it has been a real learning experience. I mean, running a consumer brand in the cannabis space, which is highly regulated. Like, we're just selling hardware. We don't sell cannabis, but you still have to deal with all of that. We have to deal with manufacturing overseas and importing. And so there's just so much that goes into it. But when you add in the layer of marketing a consumer brand and all that comes with that, it's a lot. So, I mean, absolutely huge learning experience. I feel like we've really gotten into a groove over the years. Got some amazing people. I'll take a moment to mention Amber Swiney, who, Matt Watson, who I mentioned, his wife, who, unfortunately passed away this year. Just huge loss for the Dip family, for the Green Lion family, for the world. Amber was just like an amazing soul in person, and just like so nice and thoughtful, and she's just always there. And like, man, it was tough. And Kait, you knew her well. You've helped a lot with Dip over the years, and I mean, yeah, we can definitely give Amber a second.
Yeah, I worked with her for years. There aren't a ton of people that I've learned from in like the breadth that I learned from her. And it's just tragic what happened to her. She's like a mother to everybody. I feel like a lot of people, when they would mention Amber, it was like, yeah, she's like my mom.
Yeah, I mean, at her service, one of the speakers said, anyone in here who saw Amber as a mom figure, raise your hand. And I mean, I think over half the room raised their hand. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like one person who, maybe to the outside world, like she's running a vape business in a glass shop and like trade shows, like maybe that doesn't seem tremendously impactful on the outside. And it's kind of like, it embodies what we're doing in the show. Like with this show, like I want to show that, sure, people that are doing direct criminal justice reform are helping tremendously, but so are people that are doing whatever they're doing, if they're good people, helping people along the way. And just like somebody like Amber, she touched so many lives. And like Dip certainly wouldn't be what it is without her, and we're going to do our best to take it as high as it can go in her honor. But she's just a really good example of like the kind of impact that anyone can have.
Yeah, and they would just like take people under their wings too. It's like you said, not just, going to shows and like showing people how to use this vaporizer. She would employ people and, bring them to the shows, teach them how to sell, which is a skill, you could obviously take anywhere. And she was just, can't say enough good things about her. She's sorely missed.
She is. We all dearly miss Amber, and, Dip is not the same without her, but, we are pushing forward. And, Mike, who we've mentioned a few times, and our partner Jeff Dayton and Matt Watson, who I mentioned, they're really running the day-to-day right now. Since early of 22, I haven't been spending as much time on the day-to-day of Dip. That was, a strategic thing, so I was able to spend some time on some more things, and that was something those partners afforded me the ability to do, which I'm really thankful for. I was very deep in the company for a long time, as you know, and it's been, it's been cool. It's always cool to be able to step away from a business and see it, that you put enough things in place for it to go without you. And like, obviously Mike, he and Jeff Dayton and Matt, like they're the lifeblood of that, but like, and they're still there, but just being able to step away from the massive amount of responsibilities that I had, and being able to get those sort of delegated among people was, I'd say, a rewarding experience.
Yeah, for sure. I want to quickly go back to Green Lion Partners and the BU event coming up. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes. So Mike and I are both graduates of BU. I've been involved in BU's Startup Accelerator since pretty soon after graduation, whether it's mentoring or otherwise with the groups. And they have this incredible space called the Build Lab at BU, and it's like a place that all the different schools can come together and work on projects, and that's how business happens. It's not like just business people create businesses. Like you need engineers, you need communications, etc. So I really love that about the Build Lab. And when Cannabis was on the ballot there in 2016. Well, even leading up to that, like I'd loved the idea of like doing some sort of startup related thing in cannabis with these people that I'd already worked with, and bring that to the area. And like, I wanted to show that cannabis was a true career opportunity for students, et cetera, and like legitimate. And when cannabis passed in 2016 in Massachusetts, I finally brought the idea to BU when adult use passed. And, fortunately they were on board. I mean, they're one of the larger private universities. So just having their name, on a cannabis competition was really cool.
Yeah, that seems surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're just generally more open-minded than we think. I mean, Ian Mashter, who is a big part of the Build Lab, he was a huge part of that. Dave Frew, who works with Questrom alumni, like he was a huge part of making that happen. And they took it to the dean of the business school at the time, Dean Freeman, who's the interim president right now, and they took it up to the president as well, President Brown. And fortunately, like it got through. They even, I believe, reached out to Mr. Questrom to make sure he was comfortable with it. And yeah, fortunately, like they were open-minded people that were willing to do this. And then like when this year will be our 6th, I believe, or 7th. I think 7th. So this year will be our 7th. And it's changed a lot over the years, because when we first started, it was like crazy that we were talking about cannabis on a college campus, and we'd have like 300 people show up and tons of applications. And now it's more of like a niche almost, because of just cannabis has become more normalized, which is great. That's what we wanted. And so now we get less applications, but they're generally better overall because it's people that really want to do it.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we get 100 people instead of 300, but it's so impactful on really, I think, people that apply, but the finalists for sure. We tend to have 3 to 5 teams as the finalist teams. They pitch in an event. Mike and I very specifically do not judge, because we help choose who the finalists are, and then we also mentor them through the finalist process as they're preparing for the pitch event. And then we have some amazing industry judges, most of whom have been with us for many years, including Peter Bleilben, Jamie Lewis, Kim Napoli. And so these judges choose the winner each year. And we've really had some cool ones come out of it. And so, yeah, at this night, everybody pitches, and people get to ask questions, etc. And it's just like a sort of a coming together of the local cannabis community and the BU community. And it's just like always a really vibrant evening. And it's one of Mike and I's like favorite things to work on each year is we get to work with, they're not always young people, because anyone that is a BU student or alum can apply. And go to buglp.com if you're one of those that are interested.
We'll put the link at the bottom.
Yeah.
The page.
And it's just been a really rewarding experience. Carl, who founded Anaboto, that won a couple years ago, like he's reaching tremendous heights these days. And Marion McNabb, who was our first winner, who has the Cannabis Center of Excellence in Massachusetts. She is doing tremendous things and has become like a real stalwart in the Massachusetts cannabis industry and even in the national cannabis industry. So, even if we've had amazing winners pretty much every year, but even if we only had Carl and Marion, like they're just like incredible. So it's been really cool to see what's come out of this event and just the community that's built up around it, and like people coming up to us at the events and saying, I was here last year and like I'm applying next year, etc. Like it's always fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen some pretty cool stuff come out of this. I'm excited to see what's next. Let's move on to Big Smits Entertainment. You're the co-founder. Tell us about it. What are you guys working on?
Yeah, Big Smits is awesome. I mean, it is myself, my partners Jeff Howard and BJ Bales, and Jeff also grew up in Charleston, in the Jewish community. Our families knew each other pretty well. He was a few years older than me, so like we knew each other. We weren't super close. And, he's been a long time actor and writer, and, had moved to LA after he was done with school. And, I'd been seeing him in random commercials, and then I started seeing him pop up in guest starring roles like Two Broke Girls, Sons of Anarchy, Always Sunny.
Bangers.
Yeah. He's been in some cool stuff. Workaholics is, my favorite role of his, an episode that we will link to called Fat Cuz, where he played Big Fat. Hilarious. And anyway, amazing guy. We were catching up one day via Facebook message, actually. And just, I was remarking it like, oh, it's really cool to see what you've been up to. Told him what I'd been up to. And we were really connecting on our taste in film, TV shows, movies. And he was like, I'm actually trying to start a production company here. Like, you should come meet my partners. And, went down and met the team and just, really got along. Jeff and BJ are two of my best friends now for sure. And this was 2015, so around the same time Green Lion was starting. And we had a vision for creating our own brand of comedy. And, we'll go into that some more. But in terms of the name Big Smits, one of BJ's, absolute lifetime best friends passed away, within a year or two before we started this business. And yeah, Smitty was his nickname. And, that was sort of on the table when I came, like, hey, we want to name this after our friend. Like, is that okay? I'm like, absolutely. And like, they told me all about him, and he was full of life and hilarious and just like, the life of the party that was also always there for people. And so I'm proud to have, Smitty and represent his legacy. And, Jeff and BJ are two of the most talented actors and writers that I've ever met. And so I've spent the last 8 years or so trying to get everybody else to, get the chance to see that. And so we've had a variety of projects, everything from selling 8 episodes of a show concept to a platform that proceeded to fold after the sale, that was Go90, to having, movie deals fall apart so a lot of things have gotten almost to the finish line in very Hollywood fashion. They fall apart for political reasons. Often it's a change of leadership at such and such firm or studio. And so we've been super close to the finish line a bunch of times. We've, really gotten a niche and made a name for ourselves in creating short form pilot presentations, basically a short of an episode of something. And, our first one is the one that we kind of quote sold the 8 episodes of. We had Jack Black attached to, and we're working with some great people. And, that didn't work out, but it was also a part of it was because it's controversial because it's about a porn star. And yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be, I don't mark my words really often. So, it's about a porn star that breaks his dick and like trying to get on with life after that. And, I think the true show was really about like life after the only thing that he and his manager, who were best friends, knew. It wasn't about like being in the porn industry, but we were also going to like make sure to make opposite choices that people thought, like not make the obvious jokes, like making sure that women were all in the positions of power and stuff like that. And so Gone Soft will get made eventually, probably as a feature film. We have eight hilarious episodes written as well. But, I think in our pilot presentation, which is this 9-minute thing that opened every door imaginable in Hollywood for us, we were attached to a great production company called Good Universe for a while on an option deal that, didn't work out. And, a bunch of big names. Won't be the name dropper to say them all that have watched this thing. But it's gotten us the opportunity to work on some other pilot presentations for other people and work on a variety of scripts. But right now, one of those sizzles or pilot presentations that we made is hopefully going to be a movie after, sometime after the strikes are over, really digging in on a rewrite to that. And, tons of irons in the fire in the film space in general, comedy, documentary, docuseries side, and I think I've certainly mentioned on the podcast before how important I think film is for creating impact. And, I think film is one of the few ways to capture people's attention for any real amount of time these days. And it's been shown to build empathy and to humanize situations. And that's something I want to do with films. And so it's, I have documentaries about, or a documentary about Israelis and Palestinians coming together over music. And that's one way to create impact. But then, the Gone Soft movie might have a formerly incarcerated character that is dealing with the struggles of reintegrating into society. And like, it's a comedy about a porn star, but it can still change the way people think about certain things. For sure. So yeah, I'm just really interested in that concept. I have a lot of, as I say, irons in the fire on the unscripted side, documentaries, docuseries, reality, but like narrative is certainly like what gets me most excited. And, I imagine we'll talk about the one in particular I'm thinking of.
Well, I was just going to ask you, like, of all of the projects you guys have, all of the irons you have in the fire, which one is your favorite? Like, what do you really, really hope people see?
I mean, right now it's the feature we shot a year ago, The Late Game, but, Gone Soft has been the thing that I've just always, Jeff and BJ, I always have believed in as writers and actors. Like, I think they're both going to be superstars one day.
They're hilarious.
And, my long-term belief in us and our vision, I'm just super confident that it's going to pay off one day. And, that we're going to be able to do something with that. And so, yeah, Gone Soft is like the number one baby, but The Late Game is really, number one these days. My very close friend and business partner, Jeff Tyner, and I created The Late Game, and, he wrote and directed it. We grew up playing hockey together and, love similar film and different film. And I've always talked about the hockey movies that exist and the things that they do wrong and like, how we do it.
And there's not very many, right?
There's not that many. So like there's handfuls of hockey movies out there, but like the number one thing for us is like Miracle is the only one that has really good action in it. And so we wanted better hockey action. And the ones that are there, they're fine. They're good. Like Goon is a good movie, but I don't think it's a great hockey movie because there's not a lot of great hockey in it. Mighty Ducks is silly and like makes a lot of hockey mistakes and definitely has some things that haven't aged well. But yes, it's classics for us. Like, we grew up watching those over and over. But yeah, we want this to be the best hockey action since Miracle, and like that's a big thing to say, but it's also not a crazy high bar. So yeah, the Late Game, we feel like we can be one of the best hockey movies out there. I mean, if we were ever this was Tyner and Mai's first time making a movie on our own, without Jeff and BJ. And, that was part of it, is like us doing our own thing. Tyner has worked with me on my various film businesses since 2016 in an official capacity. But again, we've been friends since we played hockey together growing up. And so for us, if we were going to make a movie, making a beer league hockey movie, this is about one night at a beer league hockey game. Like there's not much that we know better than that. Yeah. So, we wrote this, and then I was just like sick of dealing with the Hollywood machine and like what it will allow me to put out there. And that was part of the podcast's impetus as well. So yeah, we just decided to make it and, put a budget together, and, this was our first time doing a movie from scratch in this manner. And like, we learned a lot along the way. The budget went up, but I feel like we did it right. We shot it over 15 days or so, in the Charleston area, about a year ago. And, we hope to finish, the final version of the cut, November, December this year, and hopefully release it depending on kind of the sales opportunities we look at, hopefully release it early in 2024. And, I don't know if I've ever been more proud of anything that like me and my team have accomplished, because it's not like, oh, we just made a hockey movie. It's like there were 40 people working on this thing that dedicated 2 weeks of their lives to this, most of whom at very low pay because it was a really tight budget. And to do a movie the right way, there's just a lot of ways you got to spread the money around.
Oh yeah, for sure. It was a huge production, it looked like, from my perspective.
Yeah, and I mean, Trident, we got to give thanks to Trident Technical College in Charleston and their film program.
We were forced to quit last time because the dogs got a little bit rambunctious, so we're picking up again here now. I believe we left off speaking about the Late Game. Yeah,
and yeah, thanks everyone for dealing with the dogs and such. But so the Late Game, I mean, I think I said last time, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of that we've created, and feel really good about it. And, you mentioned that it is, looked like a big production, and it was, but relatively a micro budget. But a big part of that was the help we got from Trident Technical College in North Charleston. They were just tremendously supportive, helpful, helping us with resources, contacts. We were able to work with some students as well, which was, really enjoyable for everyone, I think. And, I think, that project just in itself, it was honestly like the most fun I've ever had, the hardest I've ever worked, the least I've ever slept, but, it was burning the candle at both ends. And, on the last day of shooting, I, fell asleep with my head down on the lunch table after we were done with the morning shoot. And I know Tyner had to pull over and get his brother to come pick him up.
Wow.
Because he said that he pulled over, fell asleep, and it was like a split second later that his brother showed up, when in reality it'd been like an hour. Yeah. We were tired, but we're running on adrenaline up until that last shot was done. So
yeah, that's dedication. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be so good.
But yeah, no, we can't wait to get that out there. And, like I said, hopefully early 2024, we'll be able to release that. And, at the very least, I think hockey fans will love it. But I think that, it's a warm comedy that I think can travel beyond that as well.
So we've already spoke a bit about Dip Devices, as you're the president. I'm privileged to have learned more about business in general just from working with Dip. What do you see for Dip's future? Where's Dip now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned previously that it's been, a longer project than we initially expected, but we've learned a tremendous amount. we've been able to just really leverage our learnings there, and able to run things a lot more efficiently as the years go on, and we're able to release products more quickly. We have our new Rover device that recently came out that'll give you an amazing hit. And yeah, I'd say right now, like we're always trying to set the example of what it means to be a responsible company in the cannabis industry, giving back to a variety of organizations. And for the future, we hope to continue to grow. And I know we'd love to get the company to a place where we can potentially bring on some new team members, so that my business partners Mike Bologna and Jeff Dayton can work on some other stuff as well. But it's just been an incredible learning experience, and we've leveraged some of that learnings into also building another sub-entity of Greenline Partners called Greenline Innovations, where we're able to help clients get hardware products and otherwise manufactured overseas. So that could be anything from their own vaporizer designs to helping them get batteries, to helping them source apparel, and things beyond that. We've really built a wide network in actually a variety of countries over the years that have some good manufacturing operations, and that's been an interesting business to dive into as well.
Sounds like an idea factory type vibe.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's kind of like that, and we like getting to work on other people's ideas a little bit, so we can mitigate our risk a little in that process.
For sure, and it's also great to have other people's ideas come to you. That's super cool, and I'm super excited to check out the Rover. Seen some videos, some big hits coming out of those, so looking forward to that. And so now we'll move on to the podcast that we're currently on, People Are the Answer. I am privileged to produce this podcast, but was able to finally convince you to do an episode on yourself. So let's get into the goals. Where do you see the podcast going from here?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of goals, initially it was like one, to sort of satiate my desire to be in some form of broadcasting, while also, building my own sort of public voice, but in a way that I didn't feel like was self-aggrandizing. And that's probably part of my hesitance to do my own interview, is I don't want to feel like I'm trying to promote myself, but I also think that it's important for listeners to get to know me. And that'll add context to future episodes. So yeah, I mean, in terms of goals, growing my voice, but also shining a light on people that are doing really good work. And many of those people don't allow the light to shine on them. And then certainly I want to cover people doing great work that have big followings, but maybe they don't talk that much about the impact that they're having. Or even if they do, I think that people don't realize that, guys like Aloe Black are doing so much for the community, in addition to being music superstars.
Yeah, he's a previous guest, and that episode was awesome. If you guys haven't seen it, go back and check that one out.
Yeah, we can link that one in the notes. And I mean, long term, right now growth is modest, steady, but slow, and I'm okay with that. Really building up content. I look at this podcast is something I'd like to be self-sustaining, but I don't need it to make money necessarily, or make a lot of money. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about getting these messages out there, helping to share these stories. But it does cost some money to make. And so I would like to get it to a place where we can at least try to get those same dollars back in the door. And thus far, I've just been really doing a lot of research, meeting people in the podcast space. As you know, I recently attended the Podcast Movement Conference. We recorded with Craig Kramer there, and just kind of seeing what all is out there before I really dive too deep on the growth side, and building up a content library. And yeah, I mean, long term, I would love if this is a known podcast that people are excited to listen to. But at the very least, if I'm giving each guest a great sort of recording of their life story, I mean, to me, that has enough impact. I mean, even the fact that, assuming all this stuff will live on into the future, that my kids will be able to come and listen to what I said. Like, my dad passed away 15 years ago. I don't really have anything like that of him. Like, yeah, we have a little bit of video footage and stuff like that, but I don't have a recording of him going through his life story. And so I think about that too when I'm recording with someone, is like, it's a bit of a historical record as well in their lives. And, it's also something that they can use if they are wanting to get people to get to know them, whether that's, clients or donors or otherwise. So I just, even when the numbers aren't crazy high in terms of listenership and viewership, I keep those things in mind because I really believe in this and what I'm doing. And then, the most rewarding thing probably is when people tell me that they listen and they give me specific feedback, even if it's constructive feedback. Absolutely, that's great. It's just nice to know that people are listening. So, if you're out there, feel free to send us a message on social platforms or whatever. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have ideas. Like, we're really open to that. And, certainly we, Kait and I, don't have the bandwidth. You and I don't have the bandwidth to really spend a ton of time on social media, and so really want to get the podcast to the point where we can afford to invest in some help with things like that. But, I'd love it if at some point we have a decent following where I can go and ask questions of our audience and about what you guys want to see and who you want me to interview. It'd be a lot of fun. And, but, if it stays exactly where it is, I'm still pretty happy with it.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of kind of like inspiring your boys and leaving a legacy for them. And, we've heard some stories of how the podcast has inspired others and continues to inspire others, which I think makes it all worth it.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I actually, a week or two ago, as I got 2 days in a row, people came to me telling me how the podcast had impacted them. And the first one was a friend saying that, he had an idea for kind of a construction incubator. I won't, give the details of his idea out at the moment, but he basically said like he'd been sitting in this idea for a decade, and hearing the podcast, sort of inspired him to finally dig in and try to make it a reality. So, that was one of the most heartwarming things I've heard from the show. Even if that helps one other person, it's just really tremendous. And if it ends up helping dozens or more people, that's just mind-blowing, I'd say. And then the next day, our first guest, my very close friend Alex Hodera, we've mentioned, a parent of a new student at Rocket Club said she found them through the podcast, and I just thought that was pretty cool. Someone listening to him and being like, "This sounds good. I want to put my kid in this program." I think that it certainly was one of the goals of that episode. Not in that it was like purely promotional, just in that parents hearing about these things that they didn't know about and like, wow, my kid can do that. So yeah, it was really exciting to hear. And yeah, I've certainly gotten a few other stories along the way, but when I first was concepting this, I just wanted to like, I've mentioned on the podcast before, so it's not like a surprise I'm telling anyone here, but the name came up after a very, I'd say, transformative psilocybin trip. And I was just feeling a lot of love towards the people in my life that I care about and that are doing incredible work. And I was like, how can I share those people? Like, I just like kind of want to stand on the rooftops and tell everybody about these awesome people doing cool things. And yeah, that's when I came up with the name People Are the Answer. And just, if we can all work together and humanize difficult situations and just, understand we're all citizens of Earth just trying to get by, that we can be a lot more successful in making the world a better place.
For sure. There's been so many inspiring people on the podcast so far. I was just talking to my wife this morning about Barry Friedman, and I think he was on episode 69, and how that episode literally made me look at police differently, or policing, and like how they do their job and how they should be doing their job, and other options available to them, to us. And it's just, there's so many things, and that's just one example of many. I've been inspired by so many of our guests. So anybody who's been on the show, thank you. Anybody who wants to come on the show, please let us know. We'd love to have you. So moving on here, Jeff, you're involved with the Marijuana Policy Project, MPP. You're a member of the board. Tell us more about what MPP is working on now and where they're planning to go.
Yeah, so I mentioned previously, like, getting into the cannabis industry quickly introduced me to the insanity of the war on drugs and the mess of our criminal justice system. And back in 2017, I joined the board at MPP. And, it really was my first sort of step into politics. So MPP, the Marijuana Policy Project, is the largest organization dedicated solely to changing cannabis laws. It's been around since 1995 and has been the leader on over half of the changes that we've seen in the states. And it's just been a really impactful organization. There's a lot of organizations that say things, but there's less that do them. And just MPP is so active in actually getting things done that it's been really cool to see and to learn from. And, personally, I've taken it upon myself to be really focused on trying to pass medical cannabis in South Carolina. I think that has been worked on for about 8 years. I've been involved for, the last 6 or 7 of those. And, it's involved most years, other than some COVID times, like 2 trips a year to the State House, meeting with legislators. Karen O'Keefe, former podcast guest, who's the head of state policies at MPP, like on one trip, I know she and I met with over 40 legislators in 2 days or whatever it was. It was like 2.5 days maybe. And it was, it can be exhausting. And I honestly, I don't enjoy it. I kind of said as my first step into politics. I don't like politics. I don't like that our political system in this country is such a mess. Lobbying and the legislature, it's like you have to schmooze with people and try to get them to like you in order for them to do stuff. It's just not how the way things should work. And obviously underprivileged individuals have a lot less social currency in those situations.
Right.
I feel that I'm able to uniquely help in South Carolina, for better or worse, given that, my family does have a reputation there, and I'm not one to try to leverage that. But in this case, for the patients of South Carolina, for the, nearly 1,000 people that are dying of opioid deaths a year in South Carolina, that this is something that needs to be done. So I go and do whatever I can. We've gotten super close to passing it. My last trip pre-COVID lockdown, March 11th, I flew back from Columbia, South Carolina, here to Denver, and then everything got locked down. And, that year we felt like we were in a really good spot. And then last session, we got actually through the Senate for the first time, and then we were preparing to have a floor vote in the House. And, basically due to a technicality that had already kind of been talked about and dismissed previously, someone was able to kind of get it shelved. And we were right before an election, so I think even some of the supporters were like, okay, I'm okay if this thing doesn't come up right now. And, the thing about it is the legislators think it's more controversial than it is. They're way more, even both sides of the aisle is way more conservative than the average constituent, So when you poll South Carolinians, it's a tremendous amount. I believe it's over 75% believe that we should have medical cannabis, but in South Carolina, we don't have ballot initiatives. So we have to try to get it through the legislature. And the way that legislatures work, 1 or 2 bad apples can ruin the whole thing. So it's been an incredibly frustrating process, given how far cannabis has come in the U.S., that we have, over half our population has access in some form to cannabis. I believe we are at 39 states and counting on the medical side. And, I haven't been studying up for my legislative meetings, so excuse me if any of my numbers are wrong, but and we're obviously seeing adult use move forward. We're even seeing Health and Human Services tell the government that we should reschedule cannabis. And, Schedule 3, I suppose, is a step in the right direction. It could backfire, but the real answer is to deschedule cannabis. There's no reason that it should be even a scheduled substance, that it should have any criminality associated with this plant that is an herbal medicine. And yeah, I'm passionate about it. I could talk about it all day. But yeah, back to MPP, that really dug me into South Carolina. We're pushing there. And then overall, MPP works in a very large number of states. We work in the legislature. We hire lobbyists in different states. We work on ballot initiatives. Those elements are run by Matt Schweik, who's an absolutely incredible cannabis advocate as well. And we've been really successful over the years. And, cannabis wouldn't be legal in Colorado without MPP. I mean, if you listen to our episodes with Mason Tvert or Brian Vicente, hopefully a future episode with Betty Aldworth, you'll hear that, MPP was really the catalyst to get Mason Tvert here. And then he and Brian Vicente started working together. And that's really how the wheels started turning. Steve Fox, rest in peace. He was a huge part of that, on the MPP side, making that happen. MPP has been a transformative entity in the war on drugs and trying to get it to go away. So I feel honored to be on the board. I feel a responsibility to steward this important organization properly. I mean, I think the biggest thing to share is that we still have so much work to do. People see oh, it's quote inevitable. And the honest truth is that it's not. There's people that are so against us that they're going to push as long and as hard as they can. So the advocates have to continue to push regardless until not only till we're at all 50 states, but until all 50 states have equitable laws and an equitable system and a sustainable system. You know, you look at places like California and New York who are just have really botched their rollouts, and the illicit markets are thriving. And, you know, the nice thing about getting regulations is that you can feel like your cannabis is safe and regulated, whereas when it's on the illicit market, you don't know where it's coming from. And the government's just trying to overregulate it, in my opinion, and overtax it to the point that it can't even be competitive with the illicit market. So we really need, some of these states need to wipe their slates clean, start over. But I still have faith in the long term. But there's still people in jail for cannabis in our country. It's really messed up. And there's people that, you know, obviously I know the South Carolina stats because that's where I do most of my work, but you know, a stat I read at least a couple years ago was 88% of cannabis arrests in South Carolina were black people. And like, that's so obviously not the usage rate. And so it's just, there's so many disgusting stats like that out there. So we still have tons of work to do. And because people in society sort of feels that it's inevitable, sort of the philanthropists aren't pushing as much for it. And when the philanthropists saw an industry come together, they're like, oh, well, the industry will pay for this. Well, you know, over the last few years, the industry is really struggling. There's a lot of people falling apart. And some of it is because of how bad these regulatory systems are, among other reasons. And so we're not getting a lot of money from the industry. So MPP's work, the work of other, you know, organizations in drug policy like SSDP and MAPS and beyond, but we'll link all of them. But there's still a lot of work to do. So, you know, if you can spare a donate, you know, $1, $5 or more to any of these orgs, I think it really does go a long way. And they're all pretty transparent in terms of how they use the dollars. And yeah, we're just, you know, we're really only scratching the surface so far on ending the drug war. And we've got a lot of work to do there. And then we still have a lot of work to do to clean up our criminal justice system. If you're enjoying this episode, I would greatly appreciate if you could review, like, comment, or subscribe on your favorite platforms. Your engaged support goes a long way in helping the show grow and getting our impactful guests heard. Now back to the show.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I agree completely with what you said earlier about, you know, keeping the fight going. It's so important. Literally, I think it was yesterday, there was a bill introduced that would withhold federal funding to states that have legal cannabis, or cannabis states, which is absurd. And you and I could go on forever about that kind of stuff, but we have a lot of work to do. And I personally just thank you for all the work that you've done so far, what you continue to do. But yeah, let's keep fighting. The links will be at the bottom of this episode.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've got a long way to go. And like, even just reading like cannabis, like daily email digests, and, you know, whether it's on the political side or the business side, there's always at least a few things that just piss me off. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, it'd be a headline about someone that has a following saying something just absurdly ignorant. Right. And it just like makes my blood boil. And sometimes I'm like, should I even read these? But like, I need to be up to date on what's going on. Right.
Yeah, that's hard. It's like a choose your battles type situation.
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, my perspective on drugs is just like, be responsible, do what you want to do. Like, as long as you're not hurting others, like, you should be able to ingest what you want, or, you know, use whatever you want.
Cannabis is medicine.
Absolutely. Cannabis is medicine. Psychedelics are medicine. And, you know, there's another thing as well that I'll just add while I'm on this is like, safe injection sites are really important. And I think New York has one now, but, you know, it's for some reason is so controversial to people that we would provide a place where people can do these illicit things. But the reality is it's the same way with cannabis being legal. Like, people are going to do it regardless. Let's help them do it in a safe way. And I mean, when you specifically at safe injection sites, like, you're able to but literally statistically heavily prevent overdose deaths. Yep. And then you can
disease transmission.
You can give people, you know, fresh needles, etc. And if you can offer resources, but some people aren't at the right place in their life to accept resources, and they're going to need to get to a certain place. Let's keep them alive so they can get there.
Exactly.
and so it's so important to have those outlets. You know, Mike and I were fortunate to join Students for Sensible Drug Policy on a visit to a safe injection site in Vancouver a few years ago. And it was just really moving and incredible to see what was going on there. And just like every one of these people is a human just like you know, and it's like this particular part of Vancouver was like a, you know, not a nice area. And there's people on the side of the street that look like they're in rough shape. And I mean, you know, there certainly were probably times in my younger days where I would have just like not paid attention. But now I'm just thinking like, that's, you know, it's probably somebody's dad or brother or son or whatever.
And it is.
It is. Yeah. So, and so I just encourage everybody listening to, you know, drug addiction isn't something that people are deciding to do. Like, it's circumstances that take over you.
It's a disease.
Exactly. And I think I'm always going to reference episodes when I can. Christina Dent, I think she was maybe the second episode, one of the top few, and maybe fifth, but
she was fourth.
All right. So yeah, Christina Dent on episode 4, she's from End It for Good. And she talks about, you know, she grew up as a conservative Christian, taught that drugs are wrong. And she was taking in a foster child and assumed his drug addict mother didn't love him. But she quickly learned via interactions with his mom, Joanne, that she did love her son, and that circumstances had gotten her to this point. And it's the case with most drug addiction out there, is like people were in a certain circumstance and that was the answer that they had for, in whatever capacity. You know, a lot of people are get put on opioids and then they get their prescriptions cut off and they have to turn to the streets. So yeah, we've got a ton of work to do in this. And you know, I wish that I could snap my fingers, if you will, and it would go away, but maybe one day.
Yep, I agree completely. We've got a lot of work to do there as well. And, you know, I think Denver actually does have a needle exchange and they're fighting to close it down. And it's just like, come on, do we want this stuff running rampant, or do we want to like actually offer people help?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people that are against so many of these things are just, they're either completely ignorant or they're just like trying to impress their sort of feelings and way of lives onto others. But like, these are sometimes the same people talking about free speech and freedom and blah, 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 yet they're trying to push their beliefs on everyone. And it's just pretty infuriating.
Yeah. The double standards are quite rampant.
So, I mean, you know, on my podcast, I've obviously had people that I think are creating impact. So, you know, I'm not interested in having someone like from a big anti-organization. That said, like, I'm open to having like a panel, you know, if like someone that truly believes they're right and that these people are criminals or something absurd like that, like, yeah, let me know, and you'll come on and we'll bring on another expert on the other side, and like we can all talk about it.
I actually love that idea, and I'm taking a note right now.
Happy to do that.
Awesome. So yeah, I want to move on a bit. Speaking of psychedelics and also dissociatives, I want to say, because I do ketamine treatments. Ketamine is a dissociative, not a psychedelic, but has changed my life. You are involved with MAPS. I forget what the acronym is, but I'll leave that to you. Tell us more about MAPS.
Yeah, so MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, founded by Rick Doblin, I think like 37 or 38 years ago. You know, he wanted to be a psychedelic therapist and it wasn't possible. He's like, I'm going to make it possible. And I mean, his perseverance to still be working on this, you know, almost 40 years later, and to be at the point where we expect approval for the MAPS program to treat PTSD with MDMA, you know, I think in the next year. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about. I mean, so much work has gone into it, so many people, and, you know, MAPS is growing tremendously as they're preparing to launch via a public benefit corporation, you know, when this goes to market in terms of their MDMA treatment for PTSD. That's had just tremendous effects. I'm not going to try to cite any of the stats, but they're overwhelming in terms of people, you know, no longer having PTSD symptoms, you know, after they've gone through their 3 medicated treatments, and I believe it's 9 non-medicated, you know, therapy sessions. And, you know, these studies show that like years later, these people are doing well. And like, I've talked to patients who were like, yeah, I had attempted suicide and was like, gonna do it again. And like, I found out about this trial.
Wow.
And, you know, now I'm here and doing well.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited by the healing powers of psychedelics and all of the research to come. And we need to open the gates as wide as we can to research, and let's help as many people as we can. I mean, I think the problems in our society, so many of them are rooted in trauma, and psychedelics have been shown to be tremendously helpful at healing trauma. And so if we're looking at ways to end the divisiveness in our society, I think they're a key tool. They're not the only answer, they're not for everyone, but they're a key tool in terms of ending divisiveness, building empathy. And I just, I'm really hopeful for where we go with that, in terms of my involvement in MAPS. I mean, not super deep, but I've, been a donor for many years. First was introduced to MAPS, similarly as I was to the whole drug policy movement, was via ArcView and Troy Dayton. And, being a donor, I've learned a lot just through the emails and the information that they share. And I also have been fortunate to both meet some of the staff, but also see a lot of my friends get hired as they've grown. It's been really cool. So I've got some really close friends there that are able to keep me apprised of how things are going. And MAPS has some amazing people, and I'll briefly shout out those friends I mentioned just because they're so awesome, and I want everyone to appreciate the work that they're doing. They're all invited to the podcast if they'd like, but Chris Lottlicher, who's now the executive director of MAPS, Betty Aldworth, who's the director of communications, who was the voice of Amendment 64 here in Colorado, and former executive director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. She is a fellow board member now at MPP as of recently. And Liana Galuli, she's absolutely incredible and has just grown at MAPS and gone up the ranks, and is really, all of these people just have tremendous souls, and I think that's an important thing for MAPS as it grows, is to maintain the morals and the ethics that are required to be proper stewards of this medicine. And it's part of why my only investment thus far in psychedelics is into MAPS's public benefit corporation, because I have a clear understanding of their ethics, morals, and how things are going to work in that regard. And while certainly been approached about a lot of other opportunities in the space, I'm not sure where it sits with me in terms of making money on this, unless it's a system where the incentives work in such a way that healing, equals money that you can put back into the system for more healing.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes
Which
sense.
is what MAPS is doing.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. MAPS is certainly doing tremendous work, especially when it comes to research and making, psychedelic assisted therapy available to anybody who needs it or wants it. A little food for thought. I watched this documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Fantastic Fungi. Check it out. Oh, yeah. Did you see it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's one of my favorites. It certainly opened my eyes to the power of fungi in general.
Right. Yeah.
Paul Stamets is in there. He certainly has an open invitation to the podcast as well. He's the world's foremost quote amateur mycologist. Was fortunate to see him speak at the MAPS conference. Watch Fantastic Fungi if you haven't. I believe that fungi are a huge key to fixing our world in a variety of ways. And I'm not just talking about, psychedelic mushroom psilocybin. I'm talking about all types of fungi and their various attributes. And, but yeah, Fantastic Fungi is a good way to start if you're just trying to learn more about them.
For sure. Yeah. There's one part where I believe, and not to ruin it, but this is food for thought. Like I said, there's one part where it's they believe that, there's potential that we became sentient because one of our ancestors ate psilocybin at one point. Right. So why wouldn't that help the neurons connect in our brains now? So
yeah, it's the stoned ape theory, and there's a lot of things like that that make some sense. I mean, they really do change, your neural pathways and how you think. And I think they've had a really tremendous impact on society already that maybe isn't that visible. And but it's interesting to see sort of the visual of the mushroom popping up a lot in pop culture lately and on a lot of things. And I think it's a good way to sort of ease people's minds into learning more about them.
For sure. Yep, I super agree. So yeah, MAPS is doing awesome work. Check them out if you haven't yet. I want to move on a bit to Dawg Nation, which you are involved in, and we actually had Martin Richardson on episode 67. Tell us more about Dawg Nation and how you're involved.
Yeah, well, certainly, suggest checking out Marty's episode, but, he started that organization, I think around like 12-ish years ago now. And it started off, the organization is how I have always looked at it, as hockey players helping people in need within the hockey community, or hockey families helping people in need in the community. And, it started out with years ago when within weeks of each other, 3 guys on his adult league team were diagnosed with cancer, and he just started passing his hat around the room to collect some money for them and planning visits. And ultimately, a very, very close friend of his passed away that wasn't one of those 3, and he decided to like officially make Dawg Nation in his honor, Jack Kelly. And it's just hockey in general, I've talked about it on some episodes, just brings a lot of joy to a lot of people's lives. If you're involved in hockey, generally brings joy to your life in some capacity. And like, it's always a rich community, and it's like a small community too. I think earlier in the podcast I said something like, if it's 6 degrees of separation in regular life, it's like 1 or 2 in hockey. And so just to see the power of their efforts and this community rising up around someone, often just because of this one thing they have in common, has just been really tremendous. And I've learned a lot about the org over the last few years, and I have been involved in trying to get the rink that they're working on financed, and it would be the first, fully accessible multi-sheet facility, built specifically for accessibility, and where anyone can play, whether it's sled hockey, blind hockey, regular hockey, etc.
And that's out in Grand Junction, right?
It's actually, we were aiming to put it in Castle Pines. It's kind of up in the air right now, just because it's been a hard time to raise money for a very expensive project that keeps getting more expensive as various rates go up. So I'm not exactly sure where that will land, but I've made a lot of really good friends through that community. I run a skate on Friday mornings. We play at DU at 8 a.m. and my sort of first batch of people came through Dawg Nation. Like, that's how I kind of started that and got it off the ground, and it's grown a bunch since then. But they opened a lot of doors for me in the hockey community, as I realized that I really wanted to dig deeper into that in Denver. And I went from a decade where I'd only play a couple times a year to a few years ago starting to play more frequently, now playing anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week. And it's incredibly fun. It's a mental escape. It's our Friday skate in particular just has like a very specific sort of personality to it. Like, everybody's excited. It's Friday, and like, we're going into the weekend. We're just having fun. Everybody's nice. Like, my one rule is don't be an asshole. Like, so it's just a great group. Anybody that comes to that skate can tell you, Craig Kramer and I talked about it a little bit on his episode as he comes to the skate. But hopefully we'll do a screening for all those guys at the lake game at some point, and
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes and how it sort of plays into our role in the hockey community.
For sure. Yeah, Dawg Nation is an awesome organization. Check them out if you haven't. So is there a story of when you really saw how your work either could or has affected change?
It's funny, like, these questions are ones that I ask a bunch of people, and I obviously have thought about them a bunch, but I don't necessarily have answers to them, despite asking everyone, so I got to think about it. When I really saw my work affect change, I mentioned earlier the people that have told me that the podcast has inspired them, and those were certainly some of those moments, but I'm not the best at like specific memories in general, but I just certainly like warms my soul anytime someone comes up and thanks me for something. And like, especially when it's something that like I'm just doing because like, I don't know, it's like either the right thing to do or it feels right or I enjoy whatever it is. Right. Like, and like this is a very silly example. I might have mentioned it in an episode before, and it's like, I was a kid, but I mentioned previously that people don't always realize like the impact that they're having. And somebody might be leaning on something you said to them a decade ago that you have no recollection of. And so I was, a couple years ago, was catching up with a teacher I was close with in high school that, he's Mr. Seymour, awesome guy, math teacher, and came up in conversation that like something I said to him like changed the way he taught for the next 20 years, whatever it was. I don't remember how many years, but just in one respect, in that I had like missed some homework assignment or something like that, and he like went to my parents, and so I was a freshman in high school, and then I went to him and I was like, hey, I thought we were cool. Like, couldn't you have come to me? And I didn't remember this, but he's telling me this, and he's like, yeah, from then on, like I just like gave the students a little bit more trust and responsibility, and like would give them the chance to treat them like adults first.
Yeah, wow.
So I thought that was pretty cool, and I've certainly in drug policy have met patients all over the country that are thankful for MPP's work. I'm a very tiny piece of that, but certainly am glad to be there. And there's been people that have come on the podcast that have just been incredibly thankful to have this, and so I appreciate that. And even like just thinking about Dawg Nation again, like they do this awesome big tournament every year called the Dog Bowl, and I did play-by-play for a few of their games, just having had some experience in that. And I took it pretty seriously. It's just like a little charity tournament, but I don't care. And like if anybody watches it, it's going to be these players watching it like later on and recording, or like their family watching it at home. But yeah, like went in the locker room, make sure I know how to say everybody's name, make sure I know who's wearing what number, etc. And just like the teams were just so thankful that I like treated it so seriously. And it was just like, it's just like things that come natural to me in that respect. Like it's really nice to hear when people appreciate it.
For sure. Going back to your teacher, I think, and I don't know if you've thought about this, but in changing a teacher's mind, in the way they think or teach, you've changed several or helped several subsequent students and people. So I feel like that change probably reverberated a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, at the very least to all of his students, maybe beyond that. And I think like with every little good deed that you do, you should think about the reverberations. And that's why in like that last question I ask in the episodes, I always ask about how you think the change would reverberate, because I think people just need to think about the fact that change does reverberate. Kindness reverberates. Kindness is contagious. Like, go around and treat people like they're fellow humans just trying to survive, and that just because of their circumstances or a mistake that they made, that doesn't make them who they are. And I just think that's really important to carry with you, that like everything you do has a domino effect. Bad stuff too, has a domino effect the other way.
Effect.
Right? So I just think it's really, really important to keep that in mind and just like consciously try to do some kind things whenever you can.
Let's talk about mentors. Is there anybody or any people that you would consider a mentor or mentors?
I would say overall, like I've been not as good at sort of, what's the word? I haven't been as good at like maintaining sort of those relationships as I probably would like. I've always been the kind of like, oh, I'm doing this by myself. And like, I've always learned things the hard way, whereas like I probably could have leaned on someone older that has done it before, more than I did. I always do. Like I try to learn from everybody, but, so when people ask me this question, I generally, say my dad, even though he died when I was 20, just both my parents, just have set a tremendous example for me. So I just always look back to that and, still talk to my mom and frequently and get her advice, and talk to my brother frequently and get his advice. And, I would say like in drug policy, Troy Dayton has been a mentor. He just is an incredible human being that it is sort of easy to want to be like and to learn from. And
for sure. Yeah. He's episode 14 for anybody listening.
Yeah, so I would say him in drug policy. In film, I've got a few people that I sort of lean on, but those seems like those relationships are ever evolving in that space, and it's a weird space. And trying to think in terms of like my other businesses. I mean, real estate's just always been like Alex and Vin and I have just kind of been figuring our own things out and learning as we go, again, for better or worse. But we felt that real estate was a certain way that we didn't like in general before we got in. And so now we kind of do our thing our own way. And, I think mentorship's incredibly important. That's why I ask about it. But I also think it's important to think outside the box and to know what's, quote, always been done, but to not think that you have to do it. So many times in my various, endeavors, I've come across people that are like, well, that's just not how you do that. I'm like, well, okay, like, I don't know, we can analyze why it's been done this way, but like, let's talk about why not to try this way.
Right.
Different doesn't mean wrong.
Right. And change is good.
Yeah.
That's how you evolve.
Exactly. So there's a lot of industries out there where like, it's just, this is the way it's always been done. And like, even, coming into cannabis when it was sort of transitioning from more illicit to more regulated, like there's a lot of people from, the original illicit market that have been around for many decades that have true expertise in cannabis, but, very averse to change because they've always done it a certain way.
Yep.
So that has been like a collision along the way, because then now you've got all these like rich white jerks coming in from all these big industries that are trying to turn it into every other industry. And I mentioned earlier, it just happens way faster than you think. So I'd say just learn everything you can, keep an open mind. Mentors are really important. If you have one that you can trust and lean on, or many, I recommend it.
I would agree. And I would also add that you've been probably the closest thing to a mentor I've ever had. So probably I'm very lucky to have been able to learn from you for like 7 years now. So I agree. Mentors are super important. I don't think I'd be where I was without you. So
well, thank you.
Yep.
You've worked very hard and done a lot of cool stuff.
I agree. So you get one question for me. And a lot of the times on this podcast, as people ask, or people will, say, why did you start this podcast? Obviously, that's not a question you're going to ask me.
How, so you mentioned a minute ago that, we've been working together for 7 years. How would you say like your mindset around social impact has changed in that time, or in terms of how you think like impact and change happen? I mean, that's kind of a convoluted question, but.
Well, I would say as far as like social impact goes, like I personally, I'm mixed race, I'm LGBTQ in the community, I'm liberal, there's a lot of things that I've had to fight for. And so it's always been kind of just innate or inherent for me to fight for people like me or other people that might not be able to fight for themselves. But I'd say that I've learned how to do it right, while working with and for you. Like you said, you've been lobbying with MPP, just, working with SSDP and MAPS, and your work in this space has really inspired me. And I've learned, you can stand on a pedestal, you can go on social media, you can scream at the top of your lungs. But if you're not actually, out there trying to make a change or, doing what you need to do to see actual change, if you're not being the change, you're not going to get anything done. Yeah.
No, I agree. That's a great way to put it. And I'm glad that you've sort of taken that with you. I mean, I think that there is a lot of that in our society these days, of people just being loud, right, and not doing anything. And certainly hope to encourage people toward action. One of my dad's sort of major tenets was always have a bias toward action, and never be a bystander to hate. And so those are aspects that really tie into this. And like right now, there's so much hate in our society, and it's so unnecessary. And but everyone out there needs to know every little step that you take to push the other way makes a difference, even if the media sometimes make it feel like it's not.
I agree. And then there's like, the saying that fear breeds hate. And it's like, if you don't know anything about somebody else, or you're not even interested in learning, you're going to be hateful.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest things to know, is like social media creates a vacuum of things that you like to see. That's how the algorithms work. So it's important to not sort of take your worldview from there, and to not be ignorant of others, to learn about them. The same way that I said, don't dismiss a drug addict, like, don't dismiss someone that has opposite views of you. Like, I feel like we used to live in a society where you could be friends with people that had totally different views from you, and that was okay. And you could like learn about why each other thinks what they do, agree to disagree at times. But now it's just so like us versus them. And, if you look on social media, everything turns into a fight, and like it's impossible to have a conversation there. So I just would encourage people to have real world conversations and have some difficult ones. Something I kind of struggle with is like deciding when to speak up. Like, when is it effective? If I'm in a locker room for hockey and there's 20 guys in there, probably more like 10 to 15, honestly, with our attendance rate. But it's like someone says something like borderline not okay. And, I have to kind of decide in that moment, is this something that is worth putting myself out there in front of all these guys and potentially alienating myself?
Right.
But I should also stand up for what I believe in. And so, it kind of depends on the situation in terms of, if I say something or not, or if I take somebody aside later and just kind of share my perspective. But I do try to do that. And I know that people, it can be very uncomfortable to stand up for what you believe in. It can be unsafe for some people.
For sure.
Absolutely. But if you're in a position to speak out and feel safe to do so, like, I recommend it. And, just try not to be combative and to start conversations. And it's okay if they end with agreeing to disagree, but if you're actually listening to each other instead of just spewing hate and dislike, it goes a long way. And it happens on both sides of the aisle in terms of like spewing hate.
For sure.
And, like I spend too much time on social media. I definitely, I've had breaks in my life, but I'm definitely on it too much these days. But there's one person that comes in mind in particular that is just like, he has very certain beliefs in one direction, but like every single thing he posts is negative. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, can't you find something positive that aligns with your beliefs?
Right.
So I would just encourage people out there, like, the minute you see something like negative that you want to share, like, I'm not ashamed to say that I very strongly dislike and despise our previous president, 45.
I agree.
Prefer not to say his name just because it feels gross coming out of my mouth. But, he is a hateful, vengeful person that breeds hate. Yet, when like his mugshot came out, I don't want to play along with all the like jokes and memes and stuff, because like let's enjoy the moment a little bit, but like I don't think we should turn it into a joke, because then you're kind of stooping down to his level.
Right. And I think he raised like $3 million in that first day of releasing that merch. It's insane
how this guy gets away with stuff and is able to keep going. I mean, we don't want to get too political on this podcast. Right. I won't dig too deep on this, but point being, like, hate breeds hate. And it's really important to try to get that. Anybody listening to this, at least you got something in you that makes you want to listen to a podcast about impact. So, I hope that it would make you just try to take hateful things out of your life, and like, before you share something hateful, maybe think like, is there a constructive way to share this? And not to say that I've never shared anything hateful. I'm sure that I have. But I try to be conscious of like, is this hateful, or is it going to just make somebody think a little bit?
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a fine line. You have to pick your battles. We all do. And yeah, it definitely feels more like the divided states of America at this point, and things have been different. Like, I know that I've learned a lot, and just like these past, ever since he became president, I think I really started thinking differently, especially like about politics and whatnot. But yeah, if we could just like come together, really stop and think about, what we're saying, maybe jump in if you hear some hate. Like, you don't have to be forceful, but like, hey buddy, listen, that's not the right way to go about this, or what have you. But I would agree completely.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done, but trying to alleviate hateful situations is certainly something we all need to be warriors for.
For sure. So we know we've spoke about your family quite a bit, and I know how much you love them and how grateful you are for them and how proud. Them aside, if it were to all end tomorrow, what are you most grateful for or proud of?
Man, I ask people tough questions. I'm sorry to previous guests. I think I'm just most grateful for the opportunities that, I've been given, and the opportunities to try to turn those into some positive things. And, yeah, I mean, if it were to all end tomorrow in some capacity, I think just grateful for the chance to be here and try to make things a little better. I don't know. It feels like Feels like a cop-out answer. I don't know if I'd like this from a guest.
I mean, it's honest, though. So if you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, we kind of touched on this earlier, but what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
Yeah, I mean, and having listened to everybody else's answers of this, like, there's so many different directions I could go, and like,
there's been some good ones.
Yeah, I mean, like, and we can talk about, the themes that have, before I give an answer, like the themes that have generally come up are around like making sure people don't have to worry about surviving every day and allowing them to thrive, and climate change comes up, poverty and hunger in general come up, and for me, in answering this, it's always the question of like, okay, which change will reverberate the most to hopefully alleviate many of those things, and certainly like empathy and ending divisiveness would be really helpful in that. But I think the thing, man, I'm really sorry to previous guests, but yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think that overall, every single individual has a ton of potential. So like, I imagine, I don't have numbers in front of me, I imagine a majority of our planet has to worry about survival more than they do have to think about thriving and what will allow them to thrive. And so, I think I'll go with a sort of a comment that other people have made, is just like ending the need for people to have to worry about survival. Like, regardless of if you're conservative or liberal or if you're a libertarian, like, to me, the bottom line is we live in a world where we do have the resources to make sure everyone is taken care of, at least to a base level. And I know that, again, that can go against certain beliefs, but like, the bottom line is we're all humans. Why not give everybody a nice level to start on? And I'm not saying that I know the answer to that, like universal basic income or otherwise, but if we could be in a world where people didn't have to worry about surviving every day, and they could worry about or think about like what they're best at, what they feel best doing, happy people is going to result in a happier, better society with more progress. Like, even if that concept seems crazy to people, it's hard to deny that like people focused on enjoying life or thriving versus putting food on the table are going to achieve more things.
Yep, I would agree completely. Jeff, it's been awesome learning more about you. I'm so glad we were able to do this episode. How can people support you and your impact?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, please, appreciate you listening to the podcast. Please share it with friends. Writing reviews or rating on various platforms, goes a really long way. Commenting on stuff goes a long way. Interacting with us on social. So that'll be my first plea, is to like be, if you like the podcast, if you like People Are the Answer, if you believe that people are the answer, become an advocate for the podcast in your community. And then I would say, please support drug policy and criminal justice reform. We'll put the links for the various organizations that I work with that I highly recommend donating to, and or getting involved with volunteering. Think about the human in someone first. That's how you support what I want people to do, is just like, in every situation you're in where you're having judgmental or negative thought about someone, think of like what the root of that is, like why they are a certain way, because we all are humans just trying to make it. And I think it's important to have empathy towards one another.
That's beautiful. I agree. Well, love that. Thanks, Jeff, for doing this episode, and let's keep chugging along.
Yeah, Kate, thank you for doing the interview. I know it was your first one here, and I really appreciate you. You did a great job, and excited to continue to grow our work together.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with friends, and reviews or subscriptions on your favorite platforms go a long way to help the show grow. I want to share these incredible people and their remarkable work with as many others as possible. Thanks for your support. For more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.